There is a strange power in silence, a power so profound that it can unravel certainty, destabilize confidence, and plant fear in the heart of someone who once felt unshakable. When a man does not rush to explain, when he does not scramble to justify, when he does not fill the air with nervous words, he is no longer playing by the expected script. That silence, that pause, becomes louder than any outburst. It forces the other person, in this case, a woman, to turn inward. She begins to question, to doubt, to search for meaning in the absence of noise. Female psychology reveals something most men overlook. Many women thrive on emotional exchanges. Words, whether loving or defensive, angry or sweet, are fuel. They reaffirm her role, her power, her ability to command your attention. But silence denies her that fuel. Silence forces her to sit with herself, and often what she finds within is unsettling. The Stoics believed that true mastery is not shown through reaction, but through restraint. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should be like the rock against which waves crash, unmoved, while the sea breaks around it. Agnes Callard, one of today's most thought-provoking philosophers, reminds us that transformation does not come from comfort, but from friction, from resisting the impulses that seek to control us. Silence is exactly that kind of friction. To remain silent when pressured to react is not weakness. It is discipline. It is sovereignty. It is a declaration that you are not bound by another's emotional storm. And to a woman who relies on predictable responses, your silence is not emptiness. It is a mirror, one that reflects back her own doubts. This is why your silence turns her confidence into fear. And this is where the journey begins. Part 1. Silence as the disruption of certainty. A woman's confidence in a relationship or interaction often rests not only on her sense of self, but on her ability to read and control the man before her. When she can provoke a reaction, whether affection, anger, or explanation, she feels secure. She knows where she stands, because she knows how you will respond. But when you remain silent, you shatter that certainty. Silence interrupts the rhythm she expects. It denies her the satisfaction of pulling the strings. In that moment, she loses her compass. And what follows uncertainty? Anxiety. The confidence she once displayed transforms into restlessness. Agnes Callard speaks often about aspiration, the idea that we grow by reaching toward values we do not yet fully understand. When you use silence wisely, you become that aspirational figure. You stop being fully knowable, fully predictable. You represent a higher standard of control that she cannot yet grasp. And in that gap, in that mystery, her confidence begins to tremble. The female psyche often interprets silence as withdrawal, rejection, or hidden strength. All three provoke unease. She wonders, did I go too far? Why is he not reacting? What does he see that I don't? Has he lost interest? Or has he risen above me? This spiral of questions is not caused by cruelty. It is caused by the absence of predictable validation. And that is why silence works. The Stoics would say, if you want to test your power, see how well you can resist being pulled by someone else's emotions. If you can remain calm while others seek to provoke, you are free. And when you demonstrate this freedom through silence, you are no longer just another man in her world. You become the measure by which she evaluates her own behavior. Her confidence collapses, not because you attacked it, but because you withheld what sustained it. Part 2. Silence as the amplifier of insecurity. Words clarify. Silence magnifies. When you speak, you give her data, something to analyze, argue with, dismiss, or use against you. But when you remain silent, you give her nothing. And the human mind cannot stand nothingness. It rushes to fill the void with imagination, with projection, with fear. In female psychology, this projection is especially strong. A woman faced with your silence often begins attributing meaning to it. He must be disappointed. He must be judging me. He must be stronger than I thought. Or worse, he must no longer care. Every possibility feeds her insecurity. Agnes Callard reminds us that philosophy is not about knowing all the answers, but about learning to live in the discomfort of not knowing. Your silence forces her into that exact discomfort. She cannot know what you are thinking, what you are planning, or what you truly feel. And that lack of knowledge eats away at her confidence. Instead of you chasing her with explanations, she begins chasing clarity within herself. She replays her actions, her words, her tone, searching for what caused your silence. What once made her feel powerful now makes her uneasy. What once fed her confidence now exposes her vulnerability. This is the paradox. Silence feels like absence, but in reality, it is presence multiplied. It lingers in her mind longer than words ever could. The Stoics would call this the power of restraint, choosing not to add fuel to the fire, but instead letting the fire burn itself out. Your silence forces her to confront her own fears without you lifting a finger. And when that happens, she realizes something unsettling. Her confidence was not solid. It was fragile, and your silence revealed it. Every woman wants to believe she is independent, emotionally self-sufficient, and in control. Yet, much of her confidence, especially in relationships, is tied to how effectively she can draw emotional energy from the man she interacts with. She may test, tease, provoke, or demand, not because she hates you, but because the validation you provide confirms her sense of power. When you are quick to respond, when you argue back, when you reassure, when you justify, you reveal that you are tethered to her moods. She speaks, you react. She presses, you bend. This confirms to her that she holds leverage, but when you are silent, the truth surfaces. She realizes that her emotional state depends on you far more than she admitted. She cannot sustain her confidence in the absence of your response. Her supposed independence collapses under the weight of her dependence. Agnes Callard's philosophy of aspiration is helpful here. She explains that we grow by moving toward ideals we do not yet fully grasp. In this case, your silence forces her to confront the fact that she has not yet grasped the ideal of true self-possession. She wanted to believe she held control, but in your silence, she discovers that her strength was conditional. It leaned on your reactions. This realization stings. It plants fear. Because for the first time, she sees that her power was never as absolute as she believed. Your silence unmasks her dependence, and in that exposure, she is humbled. The Stoics would say that dependence on external validation is slavery. The man who relies on another's praise or another's anger is not free. But in turning the mirror back on her, your silence shows her the same lesson, that her confidence was never her own. It was built on your willingness to engage. Now that you withhold engagement, her foundation trembles. Part 4. Silence as a test of patience. There is a difference between silence born of fear and silence born of strength. The former is avoidance. The latter is discipline. Women can sense the difference. And when your silence is rooted in calm mastery, it becomes a test, not of you, but of her. Patience is one of the rarest virtues in modern relationships. We live in an age of instant replies, instant validation, instant attention. When you step out of that cycle and choose silence, you force her into an unnatural position, waiting. At first, she may treat your silence lightly. She may assume you will soon break. But as time passes and you remain composed, her patience erodes. The waiting gnaws at her confidence. She begins to feel powerless, not because you are attacking her, but because you are demonstrating something she cannot easily imitate: self-control. Agnes Callard speaks of philosophy as a lifelong project, something that requires endurance. In the same way, your silence reveals endurance. It shows that you are not a man moved by impulse, not a man enslaved by the need to speak, not a man who fears the discomfort of waiting. This endurance is intimidating. It unsettles her. Female. Psychology often ties confidence to influence, the ability to move a man, to shape his mood, to provoke his reaction. But if you remain silent, you reveal that her influence is limited. No matter how much she presses, your patience outlasts her persistence. The Stoics saw patience as the core of wisdom. Epictetus taught that we cannot control the external world, only our responses. Your silence embodies this teaching. You do not try to control her words. You do not fight her emotions. You simply hold your ground, unmoved. And in doing so, you pass a test she did not even know she was taking. The longer she waits, the heavier the silence becomes, and with every passing moment, her confidence turns to unease. Part 5. Silence as the shadow of authority. Authority is not declared, it is felt. A true leader does not need to shout to be obeyed. He does not need to argue to be respected. His presence alone commands attention. Your silence, when grounded in composure, casts the shadow of authority. It communicates that you do not need her approval to validate your worth. You do not need to defend yourself to prove your strength. You do not need to break the silence to establish dominance. You already have it. Agnes Callard often highlights how philosophy shapes not just thought, but being. A man who embraces silence does not merely act differently, he is different. He embodies a higher standard. He is not reactive, he is reflective, not impulsive, but intentional. His authority comes not from what he says, but from what he withholds. Female. Psychology is highly sensitive to this. Women are drawn to authority, not the kind that bullies, but the kind that radiates inner steadiness. When you remain silent, you demonstrate that authority without saying a word. She feels it. And because she feels it, her confidence begins to falter. The Stoics taught that the man who rules himself rules the world. By refusing to be provoked into noise, you show that you rule yourself, and that self-mastery radiates outward as authority. To her, the silence becomes unbearable, not because it is empty, but because it is full of weight, full of presence, full of meaning. Every moment you withhold words, you communicate that you are above the need for validation, and in that shadow of authority, her confidence no longer feels like power. It begins to feel like fragility. It begins to collapse under the weight of your stillness. Silence is not only absence, it is reflection. When you stop speaking, you stop supplying her with distractions, excuses, or explanations. She no longer has your words to lean on. All she has is herself. And this is where silence becomes dangerous. For her confidence, because it acts as a mirror. It reflects back her doubts, her mistakes, her insecurities. Without your responses to cover them, she must face them. Agnes Callard often speaks of philosophy as a confrontation with truths we'd rather avoid. We aspire not by running from our inadequacies, but by facing them until we grow beyond them. Your silence forces her into this confrontation. She sees her own behavior more clearly when you refuse to explain it away. She sees her dependency when you refuse to validate it. She sees her fears when you refuse to calm them with words. Female psychology tells us that many women rely on reassurance to mask inner uncertainties. When you give none, those uncertainties rise to the surface. She begins to wonder, am I enough? Did I go too far? Is he stronger than me, or has he already moved beyond me? The Stoics would say, the greatest fear is not external, it is internal. We fear our own weakness. We fear our own fragility. Your silence forces her to meet that fear. And in that confrontation, her confidence begins to crack. Silence, then, is not cruelty. It is a mirror. And what she sees in it depends not on you, but on her. Part 7. Silence as the path to respect. Every man wants respect, but too many chase it in the wrong way. They argue, they shout, they demand. Yet respect is never won through desperation. It is won through discipline. Silence, when rooted in calm authority, transforms fear into respect. At first, your silence unsettles her. It shakes her confidence. But over time, she begins to recognize it for what it is. Strength. A strength rarer than charm, rarer than wealth, rarer even than intelligence. The strength to master oneself. Agnes Callard's vision of philosophy is not about clever arguments, but about transformation, becoming someone greater than you are. When you choose silence over impulse, you transform yourself into a figure of steadiness. You show that you are not controlled by moods, nor by provocation, nor by fear of abandonment. Female psychology acknowledges this truth. A woman may resist. She may push. She may test. But deep down she longs to respect the man she is with. Respect does not come from being overly available, nor from explaining endlessly. It comes from proving, through action, or through silence, that you cannot be bent. The Stoics wrote that the man who does not need the crowd's approval is the man who commands it. Likewise, the man who does not need to fill silence with words is the man whose silence speaks volumes. When she finally sees this, her fear transforms into something deeper. Admiration. Respect. A recognition that your silence was not neglect, but proof of your inner sovereignty. Ending so, remember this. Your silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is not surrender. It is a tool, a weapon forged in discipline, sharpened by patience, and strengthened by self-mastery. When you refuse to be provoked, when you refuse to be predictable, when you hold your ground in silence, you are doing more than unsettling her confidence. You are showing her and yourself that you live above the noise. Agnes Callard teaches us that philosophy is about aspiration, about reaching for what we are not yet, but could be. In silence, you embody that aspiration. You become more than reactive flesh. You become a man of presence, of weight, of authority. The Stoics would remind you, control over yourself is control over everything. And in silence, you prove that control. To the woman, your silence may at first create fear, but to you, it creates freedom. And in time, that freedom earns you something greater than fear, respect. So let your silence speak. Let it be your strength. And let it remind both her and you that true power does not need to shout.